A Bloody Action Film with Heart, Part 2. I couldn't resist, you guys. I'm sorry. So in preparation for filming this review, and I feel like my voice is wanting to leave me again, even though my throat's not bothering me. It's so weird. Sorry. Okay, what I was saying was, in preparation for filming this review, I went back and revisited my review for the first Extraction movie, which I uploaded on April 27th, I think, of 2020. I had seen it just the night before, or very shortly before having filmed it. It had come out just a day or two before I watched it. I ate it up. I really enjoyed the movie, and going back and listening to the review again reminded me of stuff about the first film that I had forgotten, but also, interestingly enough, some of the same things that I marked as pros in here, I mentioned as pros for the first movie. So it carries over pretty well. Like those same things that I liked about the first movie were definitely present here. I'll start right off the bat with saying this movie did not really disappoint. I have some minor cons, but it's nothing that's enough to notch this film down to any large degree. I had a little bit of a con with something that I mentioned in the first movie too, but this movie, oh my gosh, you guys, like, I do not get at all the lower ratings this movie has, critic-wise and audience-wise, compared to the John Wick movies. These movies are superior to the John Wick films, specifically John Wick 2, 3, and 4. No question in my mind. Don't even try to convince me otherwise. Because this movie has what John Wick 4 was lacking, which is some basis in reality, much more heart to it, and I didn't get bored during the action scenes. As opposed to John Wick 3 and 4 especially. I was just like, oh ho-hum, here comes another one. Not the case with this movie at all. Very intense, exhausting viewing. There were some times where I just had to pause it to take a breath. That's how wound up I was getting. And it took me multiple viewings to watch this. I think maybe 2 to 3 viewings to watch it, because I spread it out over the period of a few nights, and like maybe I started watching it late at night, and I was like, I can't watch this thing all in one sitting because I'm gonna get sleepy, but also if I do force myself to continue on, I'm gonna be so hyped up that I won't be able to sleep. So I would pick a good stopping point. Okay, this movie. Let me go back and just talk about the synopsis. The synopsis is, he is tasked with, so this is his ex-wife. She has reached out to him to have him go into this jail, maybe in Georgia, I can't remember what country, some jail over there in Eastern Europe, to rescue her sister and her sister's children who are being kept, who are being kept in the jail with her husband, who is this mobster guy, the brother of this dude, the main baddie in here. She's being kept in the jail to be watched over by the husband. She wants to get out. So that's the basic mission. He's going in there to rescue her. So one of the main things that I was concerned about when I found out there was going to be another Extraction, and then it came out and people were talking about how good it was, and it's so good. I was concerned about how effective or how convincing will this film be at showing us how he managed to survive the injuries that he had at the end of the first one. Now, you knew that he survived in the first one because of the very last scene that it shows, the very last quick scene that it shows, the quick shot at the very end. But I was like, doggone, those injuries he suffered, there's just no way. And if this were not a fiction movie, you could say, yeah, there's just no way. There really is no way. But with some movies, there is a certain level of disbelief that you have to suspend in general with a lot of action films. With a movie like John Wick, it pushed me to the limit and beyond. I could not with it anymore. With movies like this, I'm a little more forgiving because it's much more rooted in realism. So I did appreciate how in the beginning they showed how he survived, and they also showed that this was not something that he just bounced back from overnight. He went through extensive recovery. He had to go through retraining his body to get back into the shape that he needed to be. And the retraining of his body wasn't something that took place in a week and then he was ready to go. No, it was like many weeks. And so that was definitely something in the pro category for me. This movie felt like it had, not that the first one didn't. The first one had a lot of emotional depth. I was very connected emotionally to both his character and the character of Obi, who was the kid he was rescuing. This had a very similar level of emotional pull to it. Maybe a tad more because you get a little bit more into his backstory with his son who died, and his ex-wife makes an appearance in here. So there are some moments with her, and there was a pretty touching scene that happened later on in the film between him and her. I'll get around to her. I had a problem with her. Did not like her character. And that's one of the things that's in the con category. But that's just an issue with the character I didn't like. Not necessarily a con with the story in general. So anyway, because of this convincing action narrative that they've got going on, and yeah, there's certainly moments where it's like, okay, he should have gotten shot by now. And I mean, he does get very much wounded throughout the course of this film like he did in the first one. They all do pretty much. This is a film that is one of those rare times when an overabundance of action doesn't bore me, as opposed to John Wick. And it feels proper to the story. And it's also more realistic. He's not falling off buildings 2 or 3 times and hobbling away as if nothing happened. So that's why this movie just feels so much more real and more convincing and just better. Just better. This is the type of action movie that I like. Definitely that sense of, oh my gosh, they could die at any moment. There is definitely that feeling of life or death at any second. Now, you know, in the very beginning of the movie, it's not going to happen because he has to live through the movie to make it to whatever's going to happen in the climax. But what I'm saying is, you never knew who was going to live or die. And as with the first movie, the choreography in here, the action choreography, just outstanding. I couldn't find any moments when I was watching this where it was obviously where it seemed like it was obviously choreographed. You know how I've mentioned before when there's an action scene happening or a fight scene and someone's swinging high so the person can duck. Maybe if I rewatch this, I will be able to nitpick and find those things, but no, that was not really an issue in this movie. The action was so... They're doing fireworks already. This is not even July 4th. That's okay, Chibi. She's getting a little bit scared. It's okay. Why? It's not even July 4th yet. Okay. It's July 1st. Okay, what was I saying? I was saying that this was so well choreographed, it didn't seem like it was choreographed. The action was hectic, frantic, fast-paced, so well done. I was literally feeling so tense. Like I said, I would have to pause a few times. So just like, okay, I take a breath here. I need some downtime. I mentioned in the first movie that when the downtime came, it was like, whew, we need a break. And that's exactly what it felt like in this movie. The downtime compared to the action, there's definitely less downtime than action, just like in the first movie, but it felt properly paced. It felt like it was spread out in a way that came at the right time, gave you the breathing room that you needed in order for your adrenaline levels to come down and slide into the groove of the characters and what's going on with them emotionally. It was just so well done. More action movies need to take a lesson from this sort of thing. I wish this movie and the first movie had gotten a big screen experience. I would have been so there opening night. Preview night, I would have been there. Cinematography is great, like I said. The choreography, the action choreography, just so good. Some of the fight scenes and the kill scenes were so intense and so surprising. There was one particular thing that happened that involved, I think it was a set of weights. It was like maybe something in a gym or something. When it happened, I actually yelled out loud. It's just like, oh! And then I started laughing. It surprised me. I was not expecting it. So things just weren't totally predictable in the normal sense of how action films often are, and there was nothing stale about the action in here. I was surprised to see Idris Elba in here. He makes an appearance a time or two. I was thinking, you know what would be super cool? So if you saw the Luther movie, at the end of the Luther movie, he gets pulled into this, like, some super secret type of organization that he's going to start working with. And honest to goodness, you guys, it's my daughter. She says, I hear fireworks. Yeah. Honest to goodness, you guys, I thought they were going to tie this into Luther. I thought he was going to be Luther. I thought, wow, is this going to be like a crossover and Luther's doing this work now for this organization? And unfortunately, there was no mention of that, but that would have been amazing. Maybe he really is supposed to be Luther and they just can't say because of copyright, or not copyright, but, licensing or legal reasons, like how Arnold Schwarzenegger was really Conan in Red Sonja, but they just couldn't say, so they called him another name. Anyway, whatever. There was a moment in here, you'll see it in one of the pictures. There's a hammer he picks up and, my brain couldn't help but go there. I was expecting him to wield that hammer like Thor. Great directing. Again, same director who did the first movie, returned to this one. And as I mentioned in my review for the first movie, that he had been the stunt double for Chris Evans. He was also a stunt choreographer, so he knows his stuff. And he showed us once again, he knows his stuff. Excellent directing. Excellent. So good. Also, I liked how the human element, the conflict within some of the characters. There is a particular character in here that does some pretty stupid stuff, but they made it so that you could understand it, especially when you weigh certain factors about that character into the situation. I'm not going to go into detail about that because I don't want anything to be too spoilery, but it makes sense the way that was written. The conflict going on within this particular character made sense. I thought that was very well done. The chick who was in the first one with him, I mentioned her and how I liked the chemistry between her character and his character, that you could tell there was, that girl right there, you could tell there was this deep level of love, not necessarily romantic love, but just a bonding that they had with each other, and they got along very well. And the same holds true in this movie. She's in here more than she was in the first one, which is an absolute plus. I loved her character in the first one, and she is so badass in here, and yet she's not like a Mary Sue type, can kick everybody's butt without anything happening to her. Oh, no. She gets her ass kicked as well. But she's smart and she knows her stuff. I mean, you could see she is convincing as someone, a female, who can take on a bunch of people in this fighting that was happening. She's highly trained, highly skilled. She knows how to engage in physical combat, and she was great. I loved her in here. Yeah, I thought that the actress who played her did an excellent job. And once again, as I mentioned in the first movie, or in my review for the first movie, Chris Hemsworth's acting in here, his dramatic acting, very well done. There were moments in here that were touching to me, grabbed me a little bit in the throat. He does a really good job of portraying this father who is still dealing with intense grief over the loss of his child and the dissolution of his marriage because of that, and the guilt that he carries and the grief that he still carries is just right there, just under the surface. And he did a great job at portraying that. And so all of those things are in the pro category. And I think I've gone through everything that I wrote down. Let me just review it real quick. Something that I also wanted to mention as a pro in here, and I just remembered it, but I had forgotten to write it down, was the baddie in here. I felt like the baddie was a very well written character. They give you backstory on him and why he is the way he is and why he's ruthlessly pursuing them the way he is, and it makes complete sense. So another well-written bad guy, kudos to them for that. He's not just your superficial cardboard cutout baddie. Neither were the baddies in the first movie. So that positive, that pro from the first movie carried through also into this movie. Very happy about that. Okay, so yes, I believe I've I've gone through everything. So now I'm going to touch a bit on the cons. And some of these cons might veer a little bit into spoilery territory. It's not going to be major spoilers. I'll try to remember to preface what I'm saying with a warning that it might be a little spoilery. One of the cons in here is that some of the scenes felt like a bit much, touching on similar issues with John Wick as far as some of the stuff that just a bit over the top. Maybe if I rewatched the first movie, I'd feel the same way, but I'm not sure because I did specifically compare the first movie to John Wick and how John Wick was too ridiculous and crazy and over the top as opposed to this one, which felt just more rooted in realism. The same holds true, but there are a couple times where it's like, okay, he should have been shot by now, or okay, there's no way he could have not fallen in this particular moment, that sort of thing. Fortunately, it's not something that happens to the point that it became super annoying, like in John Wick 4 and 3 and stuff like that. So it's certainly something that is forgivable. Now, other cons that I had with the movie, and it's really more directly tied into just the way the characters are. What I just mentioned is really the main con with it. Definitely not enough to dissuade from my enjoyment at all. But something that I was hoping they would do, maybe this is a tad spoilery. Something I was hoping that they would do is that they would tie back around to where he went and revisited the kid. You know, at the end of the first extraction, it shows him standing there watching the kid swimming, and the kid comes up out of the water and sees him, and then that's when it ends. I was hoping that they were going to tie around to that, and they didn't. That's not fair to call that a con. It's just, I was hoping for something like that. Some other things that I put in the con territory, but it's not really a con with regard to the movie as a whole. It's a con that I feel about the character of his ex-wife. I did not like her at all. She was... I'm trying to think of a good word to describe her. Okay, I called her an idiot. His ex, an idiot. That's what I wrote. So basically, their marriage didn't survive the loss of their child. And I don't remember if they touched on this part in the first movie, but his child was dying with cancer. He was about ready to be deployed to go back to like Afghanistan or something. And so instead of insisting that he stay behind with his dying child, he went ahead and took the deployment. He left. And this was because he could not bear to be there and see his child die. He could not bear to be in this situation that he couldn't fix. Because you know how a lot of times, in general, men, they want to fix things. They can't fix the situation. They feel helpless, as was the character of Chris Hemsworth in here. And so that's like one of the biggest regrets that he has, is that he didn't stay behind to be with his son. And his wife, I don't know how much, I think that was probably the reason for their divorce. She never forgave him for that. And she continues to not have forgiveness for him and his actions during that time. So when they're interacting with each other, one of the first things he says to her is to apologize for not being there. And she says she doesn't want to hear it. And then she proceeds to press him into conversation about it. You just said you didn't want to hear it. Why are you talking about it now? That was annoying, especially given the fact that the mission that Chris Hemsworth was on in here had to do with her sister and her sister's children. And she comes to him and he's just rescued her family and she's treating him like this. I didn't like that. And then at the very end, he says to her, thank you for doing what he couldn't. In other words, being there with their child when he died. And she said some stuff that was nice, you know, to kind of help to ease his guilt a bit. She said his last vision of you, or his last thought of you, was not you leaving, it was you going off to save people. He considered you a hero. So that was like one of the kindest things she said to him in there. But then I thought to myself, okay, this is the perfect time for the writers to have put, when he said to her, thank you for doing what I couldn't, was the perfect time for the writers to say, or for the writers to have her say to him, thank you for doing what I couldn't. Thank you for going out to save my sister and her family because I couldn't. Oh, that was such a missed opportunity, and that made me intensely dislike her even more. So those were the main cons that I had about this movie. They're not huge. They are not enough to make me dislike this film, because I absolutely do not. I love this movie. It is an action movie lover's dream, and I highly recommend it, especially if you enjoyed the first one. So I'm very pleased that this ended up being as solid as it was. I was worried that it was going to falter, and fortunately it did not. So I consider that a plus in my book. 2 thumbs up in my book. Anyway, that's all I can think to say about Extraction 2. I hope you guys take the time to check it out. It was, in my opinion, well worth my time, and I'm so happy that it ended up being such a solid movie. I don't think I have anything else to say, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.